So in 1938, there was a restaurant in Beverly Hills where people lined up down the block for one thing: a slab of prime rib carved right at your table off a gleaming silver cart. Today, that exact same cut sits under a heat lamp at a buffet for $14.99. So what happened? I've spent way too long going down the rabbit hole of the Golden Age American prime rib house, and honestly, I can't stop thinking about everything we lost. Because number 15 was once the single most impressive thing a kitchen could serve, and almost nobody makes it the old way anymore. Number 3 got set on fire at your table by a man in a tuxedo. These 25 meals were not dinner. They were events. People dressed up for them, saved up for them, lined up around the block for them. Then America got cheap, and we forgot what dinner could be. Hit that subscribe button, and let's count down the 25 forgotten prime rib house meals America lined up for. Starting with number 25. Number 25, the relish tray. Before you ordered anything, before the menu even came, a waiter set down a chilled 3-compartment dish packed with celery sticks, carrot curls, radishes, green olives, and a scoop of pickled cottage cheese. This was not a garnish. It was a ritual. The relish tray told you the meal was about to be serious. The vegetables came out ice cold and snapping fresh, kept on crushed ice in the back so they crunched like the first bite of fall. Families would empty it before the salad arrived, then quietly hope for a refill. In 1958, a relish tray cost the restaurant maybe 15 cents in produce, but it made every diner feel like an honored guest the moment they sat down. Today, restaurants hand you a basket of stale bread and a laminated drink menu. The relish tray vanished because it cost a few minutes of labor nobody wanted to pay for anymore. We traded a small act of welcome for speed, and most people under 40 have never seen one. Number 24, shrimp cocktail in a footed glass. This was the appetizer that signaled you were somewhere special. 4 or 5 jumbo shrimp, poached perfectly and chilled, hung over the rim of a tall stemmed glass, packed with shaved ice. A little silver dish of cocktail sauce nested in the center. The shrimp were cold, firm, and sweet, and that sauce hit you with horseradish sharp enough to clear your sinuses. In 1962, a shrimp cocktail ran about 95 cents. Real money for the time, which is exactly why ordering one felt like a small celebration. You ate them slowly with a tiny seafood fork, dragging each one through the sauce, savoring the contrast of cold shrimp and burning horseradish. The glass itself, gleaming and frosted, was half the appeal. Now shrimp comes frozen in a plastic ring from the grocery store, thawed and rubbery, served on a paper plate at a Super Bowl party. The version your grandparents lined up for was an event in a glass, and it disappeared the moment fresh Gulf shrimp stopped being something a restaurant bothered to poach by hand. Number 23, rumaki, the cocktail hour appetizer that defined the supper club era. Chicken livers and water chestnuts, each pair wrapped in a strip of bacon, marinated in soy sauce, brown sugar and ginger, then broiled until the bacon crisped and the liver turned silky inside. They came out hot, glistening, and skewered with a frilled toothpick, served on a warm plate as you sipped your old-fashioned. The combination sounds strange to modern ears, but the first bite explained everything. Smoky bacon, sweet glaze, the soft richness of the liver, and that surprising crunch of water chestnut in the middle. Rumaki rode the tiki and supper club wave of the 1950s and 1960s straight into every fancy American restaurant in the country. A tray of them cost almost nothing to make, but they tasted like indulgence. They faded when organ meat fell out of fashion, and people decided liver was something to fear instead of something to crave. A whole generation grew up never tasting the appetizer their parents fought over at the start of every nice dinner. Number 22. French onion soup baked under cheese. Not the thin brown broth you get from a can today. The real thing arrived in a heavy crock, the surface sealed under a raft of melted Gruyere, so thick and golden it had crawled down the sides and welded itself to the bowl. Underneath waited deeply caramelized onions, cooked down low and slow for over an hour until they turned sweet and almost jammy, swimming in a beef broth that took half a day to build. You broke through that cheese crust with your spoon and pulled up long ropes of it, steam rising into your face. A slice of toasted baguette underneath had gone soft and rich with broth. In 1965, this soup was the kind of thing you ordered to feel European and sophisticated, and it cost about 65 cents. The crock came out so hot, the waiter warned you not to touch it. Today, most versions are a sad shadow, thin and oversalted, the cheese a stingy sprinkle. The real one took time, and time is the one thing cheap restaurants refuse to spend. Number 21. Oysters Rockefeller. Created at Antoine's in New Orleans in 1899 and named because it was so rich it reminded people of the wealthiest man in America. 6 oysters on the half shell, each one topped with a vivid green puree of spinach, herbs, butter, and a secret blend the original restaurant guards to this day, then baked on a bed of rock salt until bubbling. They arrived sizzling, the salt still crackling, the green topping crisp at the edges, and creamy underneath. You ate them hot, the briny oyster underneath, giving way to that buttery, herbed crust on top. This was the dish that proved a kitchen had a real chef, not just a cook. In the prime rib houses and grand hotel dining rooms of the 1950s, Oysters Rockefeller was the appetizer that separated the serious restaurants from the rest. A half dozen cost about $1.25. It took skill, fresh oysters, and a kitchen willing to fire each order to attention. Almost nobody makes it properly anymore because it cannot be microwaved and it cannot be rushed. Number 20. The iceberg wedge with Roquefort. A quarter head of iceberg lettuce, ice cold and crisp, stood up on the plate like a green iceberg and drowned in thick, chunky blue cheese dressing, then scattered with crumbled bacon and a few halved cherry tomatoes. That was it. That was the whole salad. And it was perfect. The genius was in the contrast. The lettuce shattered cold and watery under your fork. The dressing came on tangy and heavy with real Roquefort, and the bacon added smoke and salt. There was nothing to chop, nothing to toss, nothing fussy. You cut into it with a knife and fork like it was a steak. In 1960, the wedge was on every prime rib house menu in America because it paired perfectly with a heavy beef dinner, cutting the richness with cold crunch. It fell out of fashion when iceberg got branded as nutritionally worthless, and chefs decided salad needed 12 ingredients to count. But the wedge is making a quiet comeback because some things were right the first time, and a cold wedge with real blue cheese never needed improving. Number 19. The spinning salad bowl. This is the one Laurie's made famous, and it was pure theater. The waiter wheeled over a cart with a large, chilled metal bowl set into a bed of crushed ice, then spun the bowl with one hand while pouring the dressing in a thin stream with the other. The greens tumbled and tossed, coating themselves evenly while the diner watched, mesmerized. The salad came out cold, crisp, perfectly dressed, never soggy, never bare. The spinning was not a gimmick. It chilled the bowl, coated every leaf, and turned a simple plate of lettuce into a performance you remembered. People came back just to watch it. In an era before screens at every table, the spinning bowl was entertainment and dinner at once. It required a trained server, a cart, and a few extra minutes per table, which is exactly why it died. The modern restaurant economy could not justify paying someone to spin a bowl of lettuce, no matter how much joy it brought. So they handed you a bag of pre-cut greens instead and called it progress. First pattern break. Here is what nobody tells you about the Prime Rib House. It was never just about the food. It was about being treated like you mattered for one evening. The relish tray, the spinning salad, the captain in a jacket who remembered your name, the silver carts wheeled to your table, the heavy linen napkins, the carved beef sliced to the exact thickness you asked for. These restaurants sold an experience that working families saved up for, dressed up for, drove across town for. A man who spent all week on a factory floor could, for one night, sit down and have a tuxedoed waiter carve his dinner table side and call him sir. That was the product. The beef was almost the excuse. When chain restaurants figured out they could sell the food without the dignity, faster and cheaper, the whole institution collapsed. We did not just lose recipes. We lost a place where ordinary Americans got to feel like somebody for a couple of hours. Number 18. Standing prime rib, carved tableside with au jus, the centerpiece of the entire genre. A whole rib roast, slow roasted for hours until the outside formed a dark, salty, herb-crusted bark and the inside stayed rosy pink edge to edge, was wheeled to your table under a domed silver cart. The carver, an artist with a long knife, sliced you a cut to order, thin or thick, end or center, and laid it on a warm plate with a ladle of au jus, the rich beef drippings spooned over the top. The meat was tender enough to cut with a fork, beefy in a way that no quick-cooked steak could match. The fat rendered soft and the seasoning crusted deep. In 1959, the standard cut ran about $3, and it was worth every penny. The au jus pooled around the meat, and you dragged each bite through it. This was the dish people lined up around the block for. Today, prime rib is buffet food, sliced thin and dried out under a lamp. The version they waited hours for was a different animal entirely. Number 17. Creamed spinach, the side dish that made grown men order a vegetable without complaint. Fresh spinach cooked down and folded into a rich bechamel sauce, loaded with butter, cream, a little nutmeg, and sometimes a whisper of garlic until it turned into something so luxurious it barely resembled the vegetable it came from. It arrived in its own small dish, hot and bubbling. The spinach almost dissolved into the cream, a perfect counterpoint to the heavy beef. Children who would never touch a green vegetable cleaned the dish. This was the classic Steakhouse and Prime Rib House pairing, dating back to the Grand Hotel dining rooms of the early 1900s. A side cost about 40 cents, and it elevated the whole plate. The creaminess cut the richness of the beef and added a silky texture against the crusty meat. Modern restaurants serve you a pile of plain steamed spinach and a wedge of lemon, calling it healthy. The creamed version disappeared because cream and butter became villains, but anyone who tasted the real thing knows exactly what we gave up. Number 16. The loaded twice-baked potato. Not a baked potato with a pat of butter, a real one. The potato was baked, split open, the fluffy inside scooped out and whipped with butter, sour cream, cheddar, chives, and sometimes a little bacon, then piled back into the shell and returned to the oven until the top browned and crisped. It came to the table looking like a small mountain. The cheese melted into golden pools, the shell crackling, the inside whipped smooth and rich. You broke into it with your fork, and the steam rolled out. This was the potato a Prime Rib House served to match the grandeur of the beef, and it took real kitchen labor, 2 trips through the oven, and a lot of handwork. In 1963, it was the standard with any serious cut of meat. It disappeared because it cannot be made to order in 2 minutes, and the chains needed something faster. Now you get a foil-wrapped potato and 3 packets of fake butter and most people have forgotten the twice-baked version ever ruled the table. Number 15. Steak Diane, flambéed tableside. This is the one that almost nobody makes the old way anymore. A thin medallion of beef tenderloin, pounded flat, was seared in a copper pan right next to your table by a captain who then built a sauce in front of your eyes. Butter, shallots, mustard, Worcestershire, and a splash of brandy, which he tipped into the pan until it caught fire in a roar of blue flame that lit up the whole dining room. Heads turned at every table. The flame died down, cream went in, the sauce reduced, and he plated it with a flourish. The steak came out tender and coated in a glossy, peppery, slightly boozy pan sauce you could not get any other way. In the 1960s, Steak Diane was the height of restaurant sophistication, the dish you ordered to impress a date or close a deal. It required a trained tableside captain and a willingness to set fire to things in a crowded room. Liability lawyers and labor costs killed it. An entire art form gone. Number 14. Yorkshire pudding, the unsung hero of the prime rib plate. This puffy, golden, hollow popover, baked in the beef drippings until it rose dramatically and crisped at the edges while staying soft and eggy inside, was the traditional companion to a rib roast, straight out of the English tradition the great American prime rib houses borrowed from. It came to the table tall and dramatic, the outside shattering crisp, the inside tender and rich with the flavor of the beef fat. It was baked in. You tore it apart and used it to mop up the au juice on your plate, soaking up every drop. A good Yorkshire pudding was the sign of a kitchen that respected tradition, because it had to be timed perfectly to the roast and served the moment it came out of the oven, before it could deflate. In 1955, it was standard alongside any rib roast. It vanished because it demanded precise timing and beef drippings that modern kitchens, cooking with vegetable oil, no longer produce. We replaced it with a dinner roll from a bag. Number 13. Lobster Newburg. When a prime rib house wanted to offer the surf to go with the turf, this was the dish. Chunks of fresh lobster meat folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, sherry, and a touch of cayenne, served over toast points or in a pastry shell, rich enough to make you close your eyes. The sauce was velvety and decadent, the sherry giving it warmth, the lobster sweet and tender. Created at Delmonico's in New York in the 1870s, it became the elegant seafood option in every grand dining room for the next century. In 1960, it cost about $2.50, and ordering it announced that you had money to spend. The sauce clung to each piece of lobster, and the toast underneath soaked it up. It required real lobster, real butter, and a cook who could make a custard sauce without scrambling it. When seafood went the way of the frozen popcorn shrimp basket, Lobster Newburg quietly slipped off the menus and out of memory. Second pattern break. Here is the part the convenience economy does not want you to think about. Every single one of these dishes required something restaurants stopped being willing to pay for. Time. A captain who could flambe a steak took years to train. Onions for the soup cooked for an hour before service. The prime rib roasted slow all afternoon for a dinner rush that might not even sell at all. The spinning salad needed a server who did nothing but tend the cart. None of it could be frozen, microwaved, or assembled by a teenager in 90 seconds. So when American dining shifted toward speed and volume in the 1970s and the 1980s, all of it became a liability on the balance sheet. The chains figured out that customers would accept a worse meal if it came faster and cost less. And they were right. We voted with our wallets. We chose cheap and quick over slow and special, again and again, until the slow and special places simply could not survive. The skill did not vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because we stopped paying for it. Number 12. Chateaubriand for two. The grandest order on any menu, a thick, center-cut roast of beef tenderloin prepared for 2 people and carved tableside. The captain sliced it in front of you into thick medallions, fanned them across warm plates, and finished it with a classic béarnaise sauce, that buttery, tarragon-laced emulsion that turned an already perfect piece of beef into something transcendent. The meat was so tender it barely needed chewing. The béarnaise, tangy and rich against the clean beef flavor. This was the dish couples ordered to celebrate anniversaries, the one that came with ceremony and a price that made it a genuine splurge. In 1965, Chateaubriand for 2 ran about $9, an enormous sum, and that was the point. It was meant to be shared, carved before your eyes, a meal that was also a moment. It disappeared because it required a tableside captain, a sauce made by hand to order, and a cut of beef too expensive to gamble on. The grand shared dinner became a relic. Now couples split an appetizer sampler and scroll their phones. Number 11. Beef Wellington, the showstopper. A whole beef tenderloin coated in a layer of mushroom duxelles and sometimes pâté, wrapped in puff pastry and baked until the crust turned deep golden and shattered crisp while the beef inside stayed pink and tender. Cutting into it at the table revealed those perfect concentric layers, the flaky pastry, the dark, earthy mushroom, the rosy beef, and the whole thing arrived with a rich red wine sauce. It was the dish that proved a kitchen had a true chef because getting the pastry crisp without overcooking the beef inside was genuinely difficult. In the prime rib houses and continental restaurants of the 1960s and the 1970s, Beef Wellington was the crown jewel, the most impressive thing you could order. It cost real money, and it took real skill. It mostly disappeared from American restaurants because it could not be done quickly or cheaply, and one mistake ruined an expensive cut of beef. Today, most people have only seen it on a cooking competition show, where chefs treat it as the ultimate test, which is exactly what it once was on a Saturday night out. Number 10. Crab Louis. Born on the West Coast in the early 1900s, this was the elegant seafood salad that meant class. A mound of fresh Dungeness crab over crisp lettuce, ringed with hard-boiled egg, tomato, asparagus, and olives, all draped in a pink Louis dressing of mayonnaise, chili sauce, and relish, tangy and just slightly sweet. The crab came sweet and cold, the dressing rich. A full meal that still felt light. In 1958, it cost about $1.50 when Dungeness crab was cheap on the Pacific coast. It faded as crab got expensive, and the leisurely sit-down lunch died out. The grand composed crab salad, plated with pride, has nearly vanished from the American table. Number 9. Garlic cheese bread, broiled to order. Before garlic bread became a frozen loaf, the prime rib house version was a genuine indulgence. Thick slices of sourdough slathered with butter, fresh garlic, and grated Parmesan, run under the broiler until the edges charred and the cheese bubbled golden. It came out hot, crisp outside, soft and buttery inside. The garlic mellowed sweet. You pulled a slice from the basket and the steam rose off it. This was the bread course people actually got excited about, and it cost the restaurant pennies. It disappeared into a freezer aisle product that bears almost no resemblance to the broiled to order original, which most people have never tasted. Number 8. The port wine cheese crock with crackers. While you settled in with your first cocktail, the supper club set out a small ceramic crock of spreadable cheese, that pinkish-orange port wine cheddar, soft and tangy and faintly sweet, with a butter knife and a basket of crackers. You spread it thick on a saltine, and it was somehow both humble and indulgent. The crock itself became iconic, the kind of thing families saved and reused at home. This was peak Midwest supper club hospitality in the 1960s and the 1970s, the cheese spread that meant the evening had begun. It survives in a few Wisconsin holdouts, but in most of America, it has been completely forgotten. A whole little ritual of welcome gone. Number 7. Potatoes au gratin, baked golden, the aristocrat of potato sides. Thin slices of potato layered with cream, butter, and cheese, baked slowly until the top formed a deep golden crust and the inside turned meltingly tender, every layer soaked in rich, cheesy cream. It came out bubbling at the edges, and when you cut into it, the layers held in a creamy, savory stack. This was the side that turned a beef dinner into a feast. By 1962, it was on every serious menu. It faded as kitchens shifted to faster, cheaper starches, and the slow-baked, hand-layered gratin became a rarity. The frozen, gluey versions in the grocery freezer are an insult to the original. Third pattern break. Now here is where the real spectacle came in. The dessert cart. At the end of the meal, just when you thought it was over, a waiter wheeled a multi-tiered cart to your table loaded with cakes, pies, and the makings of something on fire. That was the secret weapon of the prime rib house, the flaming tableside dessert. In a dim dining room, a captain built a dessert in a copper pan, added liquor, and set it ablaze in a column of flame that drew gasps from every table. Children pressed their faces to the glass. It was dinner and theater and romance at once, and it cost the restaurant a splash of brandy and a few minutes of a server's time. These desserts gave people a memory they talked about for years. One by one, for the sake of speed and insurance, the chains snuffed them out. Number 6. Cherry's Jubilee, the flaming dessert that started the craze, reportedly created for Queen Victoria's Jubilee in the 1890s. Dark, sweet cherries warmed in a copper pan with sugar, then doused with kirsch or brandy and set alight at your table, blue flames dancing over the bubbling fruit. The hot, boozy cherries were spooned over cold vanilla ice cream, warm against cold, sending up a cloud of steam. In the 1950s and the 1960s, ordering Cherry's Jubilee meant your night was ending in style, with a show. It was the dessert of anniversaries and big nights out. It disappeared with the tableside cart and the captains who knew how to flambe without burning the place down. Most Americans today have never seen a dessert set on fire at their table. Number 5. Bananas Foster. Born at Brennan's in New Orleans in 1951 and named for a regular customer, this became the most beloved flaming dessert in America. Bananas cooked tableside in butter, brown sugar and cinnamon until the sugar caramelized. Then banana liqueur and rum went in, and the whole thing erupted in flame. The bananas soaked up that buttery caramel and got spooned hot over vanilla ice cream, the cinnamon perfuming the air. The flames were the entire point, the spectacle that turned dessert into a moment. Brennan still goes through tons of bananas a year, but across the rest of America, it has nearly vanished because almost no restaurant employs the tableside captains who once made it a nightly show. Number 4. Baked Alaska, the most theatrical dessert of all, the one that defied logic. A dome of ice cream over cake covered in a thick coat of meringue, then flash-baked or torched until the meringue browned while the ice cream inside stayed frozen solid. The meringue insulated the ice cream from the heat, hot outside and frozen in the center, and it seemed like magic. Some versions came out flaming, drenched in warm brandy as they crossed the room. It arrived tall and dramatic. Meringue swirled into golden peaks, and the whole room watched. In mid-century restaurants, it was the grand finale. It required real skill and perfect timing, because a few seconds too long meant a puddle. That difficulty is exactly why the chains let it die. Number 3. The grasshopper. Served cold and sometimes set on fire, this was the dessert drink that defined the era. Green crème de menthe, white crème de cacao, and cream blended with ice until smooth, poured into a chilled coupe, a pale mint green that tasted like a liquid after-dinner mint. It was dessert and a nightcap in one glass, the kind of thing couples lingered over while the candle burned down. Some supper clubs served it as a frozen pie in a chocolate crumb crust, but the original was the drink, born in New Orleans and beloved from the 1950s on. It faded as tastes shifted toward dry and bitter, but for a couple of decades, ending dinner with a grasshopper was the height of grown-up glamour. Most bartenders under 30 have never been asked to make one. Number 2, the Brandy Alexander and the after-dinner ritual. The meal did not end when the plates were cleared. It ended with a final lingering drink, and the Brandy Alexander was the queen of them. Brandy, dark creme de cacao, and cream shaken over ice, dusted with grated nutmeg, rich and smooth and chocolatey, dessert and digestif at once. Couples sipped them slowly, in no hurry to leave, the evening stretching out the way evenings used to. This was the genius of the old prime rib house. It was never about getting you in and out. It was about giving you a place to slow down and feel a little bit elegant. The after-dinner drink vanished with the leisurely evening itself, killed by faster table turns and a culture that decided lingering was a waste of time. Number 1. The King Cut Prime Rib, the centerpiece America truly lined up for. At the top of this list is the dish that defined the whole institution, the enormous bone-in cut the great houses offered to the truly hungry and the truly celebrating. A massive slab of slow-roasted beef on the bone, carved thick from the center, served with au jus, fresh horseradish, and a creamy horseradish sauce that bit your nose in the best way. The meat was the platonic ideal of beef, salty, herb-crusted exterior, giving way to a perfectly pink fork-tender center. People drove for hours and waited for hours for this. They saved up, dressed in their best, and made a night of it, because in mid-century America, a great prime rib dinner was not a meal. It was an occasion, a reward for a hard week or a hard year. In 1960, the King Cut might run $4 or $5, and it was worth every cent for everything that came with it. The relish tray, the spinning salad, the silver cart, the captain, the flaming dessert, the unhurried final drink. We did not just lose the prime rib, we lost the entire evening it lived inside, traded away for buffets and heat lamps and the comfortable amnesia of getting fed fast and cheap. Here is my challenge. Find an old-school prime rib house or supper club still hanging on near you and go this week. Order the relish tray. Get the wedge. Ask if they still carve tableside. Sit a while and have the after-dinner drink. Then come back and tell me if I am wrong, because I tried it, and I cannot eat at a buffet the same way again. Drop the meal you would bring back first in the comments. I want to know if the spinning salad gets more love than the flaming bananas Foster, because these were never just meals. They were a way America used to say you mattered, and we let it go the moment dinner got cheap.